All right, so let me see if I can do a couple of problems with you. So let's do number 1 on the practice problems, because they do this number 8 in the video. So let's do number 1. And the general idea with this is it tells you what traits the parents have, and your job is to find out what their babies would look like. So for example, we're looking at flowers, and flowers having red petals is dominant. So when they say that something is dominant, that means it's really common and it'll cover up other traits. And when things are dominant, we write it with an uppercase letter, like a big letter. So red petals, we can say that's big R, or big R, little r. And white petals is not dominant. So the only time that you're going to have white petals is when there's no big R's. So the only way you can have white petals is if something is little r, little r. So setting up the squares, I know this might look different from what you've done in school before just because I had to put it in a Word document. But it's saying we have one flower that's a red color. And if we were to look at its DNA, it would have one big R and one little r. And what that means really is it has the dominant trait and the recessive trait, but we're not going to worry too much about that. I just want to worry about how to actually solve the squares. So one flower is big R, little r, and the other one is little r, little r. So we set that up by separating them on the sides. And our job now is to fill in these 4 boxes. So these 4 boxes would show what the babies would have, what kind of letters and traits would their babies have. So if I'm looking here, if we've got the big R up top, we're actually going to go down that whole column is going to have a big R. So I'm going to write a big R here and also a big R here. So I just took this big R and I went all the way down with it. And then we can do the same thing with this column. So we've got a little r at the top. We're going to put the little r in the bottom 2 boxes also. So I'm going to type in little r, little r. All right, so we're halfway done. We did the top part, right? We did those 2 r's. Now our job is going to be to do the side. So we've got this little r on the side. And the same idea, we're going to copy it across. So we're going to do a little r here and a little r there. And then same thing with this one. So this bottom one, big R is also going to get a little r. And that's also going to get a little r. So the idea is that we can look at these 4 boxes that we made, and that's what the babies could look like. Again, we're just making predictions. So the question for part B is, what % of the babies would you expect to have red petals? All right, so we know from the question that red petals are dominant. And again, that means that anything that has a big R would be red. Right, so we can go and look at our table. We're looking at these 4 boxes, show the babies. So if I look, this box has a big R, so it would be red. And then this box has a big R, so it would also be red. Right? These 2 boxes, there's no big R's, right? So it does not have the dominant uppercase letter, so it could not be red. So 2 out of the 4 boxes, or if it's asking us for a %, right? If it's asking us, we have half the boxes, that would be 50% of the babies would have red petals. All right, so we're just copying the R's down the columns and across the rows. And then we're looking at those 4 boxes we made, and we're looking at what traits they have. So let's go down here to number 2. So in number 2, it says in pine trees, long needles, and when we're saying needles, we're really talking about leaves. So long leaves are dominant, or they're more common than short needles or short leaves. So we have one tree that's dominant, big N, which I copied right here for you, has babies with another tree that is recessive, little n. So that other tree is right here. So we just take one parent, we write it across the top. You take the other parent and you write it down the side. So now we're going to fill in our boxes, right? So this box right here is going to have big N, little n, because there's a big N right above it, and there's a little n right next to it, right? And that's actually what all of our boxes are going to look like, right? So if I look here, big N above it, little n next to it. And here, big N above it, little n next to it. And the same. Right, so all of them are big N, little n, all four of the babies. So it's asking us, would any of the offspring have short needles or leaves? Right? So the only way that we can have short needles or short leaves is to have little n in the babies. And that's because it is not a dominant trait. So if there was big N, or big N, it would cover up. It would make it long leaves. So the only way to have short leaves is to have little n, right? So if we're looking at our babies, none of those boxes have little n. So none of the babies have little n, so none of them would have short leaves. All right. So very quickly, this last one's a little tricky. You can use whatever letter you want, but it says in cats, long fur is dominant to short fur. So let's use the letter F just because it's easy. And it says two heterozygous cats mate. So this is tricky because I don't give you the parents. But in the video, they say that heterozygous means that they both have one big letter and one small letter. So for example, big F, little f. So both parents are big F, little f. So I'm going to write one parent across the top, one parent down the side. And what I want you to do is see if you can fill in these four boxes, see if you can find out what goes there. Right? And then at the very end, it's going to ask you how many of them have long fur. Remember, if the box has big F, they have long fur. If the box has big F, also have long fur. But if it has little f, that makes it short fur. So use that key to help you, all right? But if you need more help, let me know. I do have a meeting coming up, but I can still send you another email or give you a call when I'm all done, all right?